Welcome to the Lift Heavy Run Long podcast. My name is Wilson Horrell, and my co-hosts are Vaughn Rawls and Amanda Horrell. You can find us at www.liftheavyrunlong.com, on Twitter and Instagram at LiftRunLong. Also, feel free to email me directly at the address wilson@liftheavyrunlong.com. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a review on iTunes. The mission of LHRL is simply this: to inspire and be inspired. We hope that you will join us each week as we speak with some of the world's most interesting people. Enjoy the show and find your bliss.
If you look at your diet plan and your diet plan does not phase you in and out of fat loss cycles, you have a really shitty diet plan. I mean, I didn't lose 100 pounds overnight. I lost 100 pounds in 2 years working my ass off.
He's not talking.
People sort of like the idea of information and support without the accountability.
I want to hear how a guy gets from Brookhaven, Mississippi to Minnesota.
I don't know what to say about my wife. You know, I mean, I'm still head over heels for my wife. I can hear you. I think most people know what their problem is.
Paul, this is an absolute cluster.
When the doctor gave me that conversation, I got moving. If you're not phasing things in and out, you're just letting your fears rule you. And I don't think that that's a good way to be.
Yeah, that's how we do it.
You sent me one message in particular, and it just simply said, "Are you the sober one?"
The cure for addiction is not abstinence. It's connection.
I can't hear anything anymore.
Hey, Paul.
Anybody that says anything related to eat to perform, the only thing that would bother me would be if they said Paul Nobles doesn't care. And so there's a lot of parallels to sobriety and fat loss.
Hey, Paul.
I was willing to do whatever it took. And I think that there's a lot of people that want to take a pill, they want to do a detox, they want to do a flush, they want to, take some kind of system. And at the end of the day, I think most of the people end up at Eat to Perform because they've tried all that shit and it don't work.
Paul, how you doing?
Really good.
Man, you got to talk me off the ledge. I've been freaking out trying to get this stuff right.
The Eat to Perform right, or the video audio portion?
No, hell no. I'm not even close to trying to get Eat to Perform right.
He's talking about our podcast setup. We keep buying more and more equipment and adding wires and things to plug things into and record and all those things. So,
we struggled with that for a long time, and I don't know if you've listened to our podcast, but it has no production value at all. And my basic idea was if we just don't do it, we don't reach anybody.
If I go into a full-fledged anxiety attack, which is liable to happen based on the morning that I've had, then I'll go get the brown paper bag and we'll pick it up after that's over.
No, that's no problem.
But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, if you're ready, with the LHRL podcast, episode number 31.
Sounds good to me.
And we have with us Paul Nobles Jr. Paul is, I'm 100% at fouling up the intros, so bear with me on this. But Paul is the owner of Eat to Perform, which is, I don't know, how would you describe Eat to Perform, Paul?
Well, I think the best way to describe it is that it's sort of the opposite of what most people do, right? Most people think, well, I have more fat to use, and so I need to, to get better body composition, I need to eat less. And in my personal experience, the eating less portion failed me over and over again. And so, that was like a 10-year period. And so I started to hire all these different PhDs and personal trainers and stuff like this. But I knew that the only thing that wasn't working was eating less. So I started to eat more and lost 100 pounds in that process. Now, that's the short version. There is a long version, but the long version is just that, through trial and error, I was able to reach my goals. And I think, when you really simplify Eat to Perform down to something, palatable to people, we take people through phases of fat loss, but we think that the thing that people struggle with the most is the period where they're not dieting, right? And they don't understand how to eat at that point. And that's where we really make big strides for people.
This thing is huge. I mean, it's an enormous deal that you have going on over there. Did you walk into this while you were on your journey to lose 100 pounds? Or is this something that you've always wanted to get into?
Well, no. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I am a serial entrepreneur, right? And I knew that there would be a subset of people interested in what I had to say. I did not know. There was a lot of things I did not know, right? I certainly would have never imagined that we'd have 1.4 million fans on Facebook. Part of that, and one of the reasons why we have such a large CrossFit following is because I am a CrossFitter, right? But that's not how I lost the weight, though. That's the interesting thing, is that I walked into my CrossFit gym at 162 pounds, and I started at 250, right? I currently weigh 273. So I'm sorry, 173. That would be like all.
I was going to say, whoa.
Yeah, wow.
This program does not work. But,
I was going to say, you might want to leave that off your advertising.
I was going to say, could you stand up and let us get a look at you real quick? 273
that
pounds.
would be like the most honest before and after ever, right? Like, there's so many people that, you see that they lose a lot of weight and you go, man, I just want to see 6 months later. You know what I mean? Like, what does that picture look like? But I started blogging about what I was doing and how I was doing it. Actually, initially, I started talking to my friends and family because I was like, man, everything you guys are doing is wrong, and I can help you. But they had seen that I was working out a lot, and they were like, yeah, I'm going to keep trying this starvation thing. You seem to be working out really hard. And I was like, but I can eat normal and still reach my goals. And, my introduction to CrossFit was really funny. There's a lot of people that have heard these stories over and over again, but you guys probably haven't. But my first exposure to CrossFit was at the level 1, right? So this was 7 years ago at this point. And, CrossFit was kind of the new up and coming thing. And I wanted to decide whether or not, okay, do I want to pursue, personal training? I never even considered, going down the nutrition path. And, they asked, they were like, what's Chuck's name? Chuck Carswell, I think.
Yeah, I think that's
out of Atlanta. And Chuck's like, there's none of you idiots out there that have never done CrossFit, right? Raise your hand. And I was like, yeah.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
How did you end up, like, how did you make that decision to just go? You hadn't been to a CrossFit class or a gym before, and you just decided to go take a level 1?
No, I definitely thought I was doing CrossFit for sure. Yeah, I was working with a trainer, and he was interested in opening up his own box. And he's like, "Hey, man, why don't we go down to Chicago? Do this thing. It's $1,000. You'll see. If you're kind of interested." I was like, "Yeah, that'd be cool." And basically got to be demo guy for 2 days. And that was not fun. I was like, seriously, every single time, but I was a stiff guy. I could not move. I could not do anything. The first day, I think they do it a little bit differently now, but the first day they would make you do Fran, and, Chuck kind of caught me off to the side and was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And I mean, I had tears rolling down my eyes, and I was like, dude, I've come so far with this, but I mean, like even right now, it like chokes me up thinking about it, because, I just felt like I was incapable, and I was watching all these people doing butterfly pull-ups and all this other stuff. And I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't do, 95 pounds. That would have been like a dream. And so I did jumping pull-ups and I did the bar. I finished the course. Luckily, I failed it. I remember walking out of there. I crumbled up the paper, threw it in the trash, and was like, screw those extreme fitness people. I'm not going to let my journey be judged by that bullshit. And within 6 hours of driving back to Chicago, that's when I started at CrossFit Templar. So I had made that big of a shift in 6 hours.
Wow, that's beautiful. That quote right there. Luckily, I failed it. Did you come back after that to get your level 1?
Oh yeah, I got my level 1. And what was funny about it is, I don't know if you guys have taken the test, but the test is sort of worded tricky. At least it used to be worded real tricky. And there was a lot of complaints about it back then. I don't know. I haven't re-upped or anything like that. But there, I have almost photographic memory, and so I haven't failed the test in like ever, So, I could typically just pay attention and, but I didn't do a lot of studying. The second time I did a studying, and the wording was still weird. Barely passed it at that point, but I did get my level 1. And, at that point I had started, blogging about my journey, and, hundreds of thousands of people started showing up within 6 months, Well, within 6 months of joining CrossFit, I put on 15 pounds of muscle. I was sort of stuck at 21% body fat. Even though I looked really lean, I was skinny fat, right? And I put on 15 pounds of muscle, got down to 8-9%. I mean, a lot of people have seen all those images and stuff like that. But CrossFit, if you look at it as phases of the journey, CrossFit was an important phase of the journey, and that was an important part of my life.
How did you see Eat to Perform when you went into Eat to Perform? What did you see that to be? Certainly you didn't have the vision of it being everything that it is right now, because it is so large. I was looking at it the other day, and it's almost like the Reddit of fitness. I mean, it's everything, so many topics and so much information that you couldn't possibly have gone into a business like that knowing that you were going to have that much content and that much participation from your clients.
No, I mean, basically I just started blogging. I was like, hey guys, I'm eating a lot and doing well. And what's interesting about it was that I just tried to start eating normal because, I had failed. My background was that I was a professional poker player, and kind of the easiest way to tell people to win at poker is just to do the opposite of whatever your opponents are doing. So if one guy's playing loose, maybe you got to tighten up. If another guy's playing tight, then you've got to start kind of moving him to action and picking on him a little bit, right? So I came into my fitness journey with that thought process. When something's failing, you have to try the exact opposite. And so I knew that the starvation model just was not going to work for me. And so that's when I was like, well, okay, then I've got to start being active. I was inactive, dude. I mean, like it's really funny because, I was just talking about this the other day. I'd never lifted a weight since 7th grade in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And here I was, 39 years old, first time touching weights or anything like that. And it's just been crazy. But once I started to write about things, there was two things that happened. One, a lot of people showed up. We passed the CrossFit Games within months of being out. And the other thing was just the amount of women that was interested. I never anticipated that. I never had any idea. But then, now knowing a lot more about fat loss and who the clients are, now you start to realize that, obviously it's catered to more towards women than it is to men, probably.
So you started blogging, and talking about your experiences and telling people, giving people advice. I mean, at what point did it turn into a service that you were providing for people?
Probably, okay, so it really was never a service. Not until probably last March. I would say that, not until Trend Sheets. So Trend Sheets is basically the Eat to Perform coach's dashboard that we can actually allow for, here you're doing this. This is successful. If it's not, then we do this, right? So we can make adjustments on the fly. That would be the first service that we really have, because previous to that, it was really more like information and support. And by support, I just mean forums. And what we found with Trend Sheets that was so vastly different from the previous iteration of Eat to Perform is that the little things mattered, right? And so people would tell you one thing, but when you see it and they see it, like in real life, it makes all the difference in the world. And so we actually have an app coming out that will be a real transition, because I think that, a lot of the people that are somewhat similar to us, I mean, even like people that talk about, phasing in fat loss phases, they tend to be more diet focused than we tend to be. I think you have to really rally for your position. And if you allow a client, like at your gym, if you allowed the client and you said, okay, here's the programming for today, and they go, well, I'm going to go over here and do Pilates, right? And you don't speak up for what you believe to be the correct answer for them, even if that causes you to lose a few clients, right? Then you're really not helping your path. So there's probably a lot of people, size of Eat to Perform is big, information for Eat to Perform is big, but we're always on the fight against, what people's natural instincts are. And their natural instincts are, if I have more fat to use, then I got to eat less. We try to make the case the other way, but sometimes that logic is, just hard to fight.
Well, you've assembled quite a team over there. You have PhDs and people working for you or working with you. Did you go into this with the intentions of hiring those people on, or did that just sort of organically come about?
Yeah, that organically came about. I mean, I always came into it. I mean, once I saw that we had the audience, I started hiring PhDs. The first person that I hired was Mike T. Nelson. Mike, has kind of a lot of, hands in the fire. We've needed more, help, more people carrying the rocks. Since then, Jim Patterson's on staff, Brad Dieter's on staff. Both of those are doctors. We just, when we went from more information to more services, hiring PhDs gets to be expensive, right?
I bet it does.
And so we've always made that a priority to have a real science-based approach, right? But at the same time, and it's also hard finding PhDs that believe what you believe. You run into that with dietitians, right? They might look at it like, you need to be at a super deficit to lose fat. It's like, well, okay, but how's that going to work for athletes? How's that going to work for people trying to win the CrossFit games? It's probably not. I see most people and we were, when we first started, there was a lot of CrossFit games people that were real interested in what we did. And we started working with those people. And I started to see, just so many folks right off the bat. And a lot of them benefited from our information. And what I've seen is the people that took it from the standpoint of expansion, those people are doing real good. What I see with the other people that are working with more bodybuilders and those types of people, they go from being real good at being athletic with an adequate amount of food to now all of a sudden wanting to starve themselves lean. And then, they go from being a CrossFit Games contender to an also ran or don't even make it past regionals. So it's a real tricky thing.
The culture of Eat to Perform seems to be very encouraging and very open and kind and free with their information. Do you think that the culture of Eat to Perform is the way that it is because of your backstory? Did you started out probably providing more hope than you did information?
No, I don't know that that's it. I think it's similar to your group, right? Like in your group, I don't see a lot of negativity. I think it's about policing it. Now, when you have thousands of people, you really have to be down for what you stand for, right? And there's a lot of groups on Facebook. They're like, well, that group's not negative. Well, yeah, it might not be negative, but there's really nobody talking. There's nobody, engaging each other. And I mean, I've seen groups with 20, 30,000 people and there's no engagement at all, right? And when you look at the various Eat to Perform groups, whether it be the training group, some of the off-topic stuff, things of that nature, you have to stand for, look, this is my business. And, I get it that sometimes it's real difficult to stay positive, but that's the direction that we all need to be headed in. And man, I can't tell you how many people really struggle with that piece. Now, I will say that since we've moved to trend sheets, some of the negativity that would normally sprout up, because people don't always point the finger in the right direction, right? If you can point the finger in the right direction, I think that that's a good thing. But if you're drinking on the weekends, you're not logging, you're doing all these different things, and you don't have that in front of you on a trend sheet, right, a dashboard, then you might point the finger outward rather than inward. And the minute we went to trend sheets, everyone had to point the finger inward. And we are conscious to call people on that, right? And say to them, come on, man, look, you know what the deal is. You can't be eating that, when your goals are fat loss. One of the things that we see, and there's a lot of negative stuff related to like The Biggest Loser and all these TV shows. And it looks like some of those TV shows are being, kicked off of the air just because there's just not that much interest in them anymore. But one of the things that is for sure is that for really heavy folks with more fat to use, activity is so huge. And so one of the people that I was talking to today was talking about, diabetic medications and all these different things. And doctor wants him, male, to eat less than 2,000 calories. And I said, I'm looking at your steps. You haven't had more than 5,000 steps a day. And you're saying you're struggling working out. And now you want to eat 2,000 calories. Okay. You haven't really given me an A+ effort. You haven't really shown me. I mean, I was faced with that similar thing. I have a scar right here on my neck, right? That's a pre-diabetic a precursor to diabetes, right? When the doctor gave me that conversation, I got moving, right? And I think that there's a lot of people that want to take a pill. They want to do a detox. They want to do a flush. They want to, take some kind of system. And at the end of the day, I think most of the people end up at Eat to Perform because they've tried all that shit and it don't work, And when I say to them, look, it's going to take a while. I mean, I didn't lose 100 pounds overnight. I lost 100 pounds in 2 years working my ass off, I see a lot of people that really struggle with coming in with a goal and then starting to love themselves, right? And then they lose a little bit of the track of the goal, And I'm cool with the fact that you love yourself, but we still need to stay on track. We still need to be focused on the things. And the journey for every single person is difficult. I mean, if you've been a female dieting since you were 12 years old, and now you show up at my doorstep at 58, man, there's a lot of dysfunction we got to work through, So That's the long answer to your short question.
Well, tell me about how you deal with the naysayers. If you have a program that you say, we're going to eat more food, eat more calories, and we're going to trim you up and lose some weight, you're certain to have a lot of people that aren't on your bandwagon. And also because you're successful. Nobody likes to see a successful person, especially when they're in competition with you. Do you have a problem with that?
No. The way that our service works, it's a subscription. So if, I don't think we see a lot of negativity because they just leave. In terms of naysayers and stuff like that, it's so hard for me to hear anything. I often wonder if Whole30s is still a thing, or Rob Wolf's still a thing, or even CrossFit. Like, I don't see anything. All I see is Eat to Perform, because that's all I'm interacting with every single day, right? And so anybody that says anything related to Eat to Perform, the only thing that would bother me would be if they said Paul Nobles doesn't care, right? Because Paul Nobles cares deeply. And so much so that most people don't even know who I am, because I'm working on helping clients and I'm working on building that side of things. So it doesn't really bother me. I think I just don't see it. The people within Eat to Perform, I think when you're seeing so many people have success and you look at your situation and you say, well, what's the difference between me and them? A lot of it's mentality, right? I think the other thing too is that our clients are different than other people's clients, right? Weight Watchers clients are different than my clients, right? I would say Weight Watchers clients probably aren't going to look at performance being a big piece of what they do the way that Eat to Perform does, or they wouldn't be as interested. We have a training template. We have a lot of people that CrossFit. We definitely emphasize. People hate, a lot of the naysayers hate when I say performance matters, right? That what you do matters a great deal, because they internalize that as saying, well, he's saying I don't do enough. Man, look, I'm just going to tell you, it's wintertime here in Minnesota. I remember 10 years ago being on those trails when it was 10 below in a parka, walking 4 or 5 miles, right? I was willing to do whatever it took. And so I see a lot of people who, don't necessarily look at it from that standpoint. Maybe they're drinking a little bit too much on the weekend. I think most people know what their problem is, right? I think they know what their issue is, but it's much easier to deflect and say this doesn't work or this doesn't work. The simple fact of the matter is that most diet plans have a really horrible success rate, right? And if you look at your diet plan and your diet plan does not phase you in and out of fat loss cycles, you have a really shitty diet plan, point blank. And, I think if you put something together like Weight Watchers or Whole30 or any of these types of things, and they're not giving you need to normalize, then that they're not giving you the full answer. And anybody can lose 15 to 20 pounds relatively quickly. Is that people's problem? I don't see that as being people's problem. I see it as when they lose all that weight, they end up gaining it back with interest. And so to me, that's the biggest piece for everybody.
And when you say normalize, can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. So when you are in a calorie deficit, people naturally assume that they were overeating, a lot of times without specifics. So a lot of the articles that we've written on paleo, as an example, we've probably written more articles on paleo than most paleo sites. And probably the most popular article that we've written was Paleo 3.0. And we were making the case that it's very difficult to intuitively eat. I'll give you an example of what your question is. So a lot of people saw some success with paleo. You know, I mean, you eat a certain amount of chicken and kale, there's not a lot of calories there, so you're going to lose a little bit of weight. Now all of a sudden you start to hear, well, I'm hungry, so I start to add some fats. When Eat to Perform first started off, we saw CrossFit Games athletes that were eating 250 grams of fat, like on a day. You know, and if you don't know what that is, that's roughly about 2,300 calories just from fat, right? So that's taking your fat game a little too far, taking the wild nature thing a little bit too far. So we made the case for tracking that. And once you do that, then you start to realize, okay, here's my holes in the game. And when people are coming from an under-eating background, what happens is they think that they're stuck at that number, and they don't realize that as they start to add more food, sleep gets better, energy gets better, workouts get better. And then when you combine all those factors, now all of a sudden, as you start to add more calories into the mix after coming from a deficit cycle, you're building lean mass. That's the other thing, is like the journey is really mostly building lean mass and occasionally at a deficit, right? And I think most people are too obsessive about that. I think, you know, in my situation, you know, I got down to 8 to 9%. There was somebody, you know, criticizing me that I'm no longer 8-9%. I'm not. You know, I went from mid 40th percentile of body fat percentage. I think people sometimes do want to project what they want fitness people to be, rather than going, well, what was that person like previously, right? I mean, I didn't do anything physical. I was overweight, you know, had a heart attack scare at 37, right? And it reversed all of that stuff. So if I'm at 13%, I'm okay with that, right? But yeah, normalizing, but just to end that point, most people can move to normal calories. They're just scared shitless to do so. And we walk them through that process to make it easier.
I want to hear how a guy gets from Brookhaven, Mississippi to Minnesota.
Well, so I didn't live in Brookhaven but 1 year, right? And what was interesting about Brookhaven was because I come from New Orleans. And as you guys are probably aware, Memphis is similar to this. How far are you guys from Memphis?
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to. Sometimes I'll say that to people and assume that they're near town, but you know it doesn't quite work out that way. New Orleans is a unique town. I think I've been all over the world, and I think it's one of the most unique towns in all of the world. So when you go from New Orleans to Brookhaven, Mississippi, which is very, country, small schools. The school that I went to in Brookhaven was first, I think it was called Lloyd Star, and first through 12th grade. And it was all in one school. And what I remember, right off the bat, I mean, first of all, it was my dad had gone through a divorce. I'm in 7th grade, and it's my future stepmom that I'm living with. I did grow to really love the simplicity of the lifestyle and being, in the country and just going out and exploring and getting to know a little bit more about myself and stuff like that. The school was kind of interesting because, like I said, it was first to 12th grade in one school. I still remember to this day Mr. Spiller. He was my history teacher in Brookhaven. And when I went back to Brookhaven one time, I went and stopped by his house, and he didn't have any clue who I was. But I'm assuming they don't do corporal punishment anymore, but he had 3 paddles. And, if you didn't have your homework in, They were all named after heavyweight champions. So it was like Joe Louis, like all these Sonny Liston, Joe Louis, and he'd warm you up, if you weren't doing the right thing. And I remember also, as a guy in Mississippi, you had to go out for the football team, and I was like 105 pounds soaking wet in 7th grade. And, I'd go out for the football team, and, they're just trying you out wherever. And the football team, the middle school, practiced with the high school, right? So they, passed me the ball as a wide receiver, and some linebacker lights me up, and I was seeing green for like 2 days, and I was like, screw this, I quit, And then I find out that all the gals, because, oh, by the way, like this period, football was a class, right? So you got off of a class to play football, right? And you did that all throughout the year. And when you weren't playing football, you were weightlifting. That was my first exposure to weightlifting. But what I found was when I quit was that all the gals were in study hall. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. I'm the only dude in study hall. This is going to be great. I just remember no girls wanting to talk to me, and they had already kind of, had their thing going. They were wondering why a dude was in there. And of course they probably figured it out real quick that I wasn't on the football team anymore. And within days I went back on the football team, and, it's funny. You remember names of people. I remember a kid named Paul Huxley. I remember everyone was named Britt, right, in the town. I don't know if that goes all the way up to Memphis, but yeah, I really enjoyed my time there. It was a culture shock, but in a lot of ways it did set me up for Minnesota, right?
So you mentioned earlier that you're a serial entrepreneur. So what was your first business?
Was selling fresh shrimp in Minnesota. I had done various things in Louisiana. Probably my first experience. I've told this story a million times, so I apologize if anybody's listened to it and heard it before. But I was 10 years old and I was in 5th grade, and I was losing in one of those candy contests. And my mother and father were getting divorced. This was actually right before Brookhaven, so it's kind of interesting that this all ties in. And I wanted to and it wasn't my mother and father. She was my stepmother, but she and I have a real close relationship. We were real tight back then, and I had 5 stepbrothers and sisters, which I, cared deeply for, right? And so my mother and stepmother, or my father and my stepmother were struggling. And I thought if I win this candy contest, there was, gift certificates to like local restaurants and stuff like this, and I could get them back together, and I was losing to like these little first graders that their parents would just bring the candy to their office. They worked at this big warehouse and they were selling a lot of candy. I was like, man, how am I going to beat these kids? So it was a last weekend, right? This is the first sign that I was an entrepreneur. Last weekend, I'm going to lose if I don't do something crazy. So I ended up getting like 3 cases of candy. Had to have my dad sign off on it, all this other type of stuff. Had no idea how I was going to sell these 3 cases of candy. I just knew that I needed to if I was going to pass these first graders. And, I just basically went door to door, for a bunch of days, still wasn't selling very many. And that year they had a strike and a Mardi Gras parade, actually the biggest in New Orleans, one that I actually ended up being in later on, actually was rerouted right near the apartment where I was living, sold all 3 cases within minutes, so sometimes, being an entrepreneur, you get a little lucky, I think that's a little bit of the Eat to Perform story, right? I think some of what we did with ebooks and things of that nature, you don't see those things thriving the way that they were 4 years ago, right? So yeah, that's a little bit of my entrepreneurial background. But yeah, I sold fresh shrimp. I was thinking to myself, why wouldn't people want fresh shrimp? And it turns out in Minnesota, they really didn't want fresh shrimp. But most people in my I was big into sports memorabilia for a long time. I was involved with kind of setting the market for sports memorabilia when that was really kind of the biggest thing going. And then my next thing, this actually still holds to this day at the gym that I work out at. Nobody knows me as Paul. They call me Beanie, right? Because I had 20 Beanie Baby stores all around the country. And so, it's just kind of my nature to find what people are interested in. This is probably, other than maybe mortgages, this is probably the first thing that I could say this is not a fad, right? This is definitely something that people are going to be interested in for a very long time.
When you and I were exchanging messages and getting to know each other, you sent me one message in particular, and it just simply said, "Are you the sober one?" ? And right when you sent that, I thought, I got to get to know this guy better. There's something behind this.
Yeah, well, that's how.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I ended up in Minnesota. If I'm just talking in casual, there's some truth to this. But if I'm talking in casual conversation, someone asks me how I went to Minnesota, I usually go to two things. I usually say, well, I started to go to school here. And then the other thing is I say, well, there's got to be a woman involved, right? And so about a year, I went through drug treatment here in Minnesota for about 6 months after getting out of DePaul's in New Orleans for about 3 months. And, at that point, sobriety, drug addiction, that was big business, right? There's a lot of parallels actually to sobriety. I mean, this is 30 years ago, right? And so there's a lot of parallels to sobriety and, fat loss, right? And having success with fat loss. And I moved up to Minnesota. I've been, February 11th will be my 30th. I do have an interesting take on sobriety. I haven't really been to a meeting. I'll go to meetings sporadically. Just every now and again, I had a little bit of bad experience, but that wasn't the only reason why I left. I think the biggest thing for me was, how when people in meetings say, if I didn't stop, I was going to die. I was 17. I didn't know I was going to die, right? Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. I knew that my life was headed in the wrong direction. I knew I was a smart kid, and, I was being derailed. For 5 years, I went all in with sobriety. And I was stuck in sobriety world, and I just couldn't get out of that. And it was just time for me to move on and spread my wings. I did think that, I was kind of a counselor in training type person. That was good, but it just wasn't my destiny to be a drug treatment counselor, right? And it was the best decision I ever made. There's a video, it's a TED Talk by Jonah Hari, and he talks about addiction. I don't know. Have you seen that one? It's a really good one.
I have not, but I will.
So what he talks about is they had these mice, and they were given heroin water. And so all the mice, when they were in a cage with no stimulation, no anything like that, they would drink the heroin water, and it was almost 100% that they would die, right? They were just going to overdose on heroin. But then they did the other experiment, and then they had like mice Disneyland, right? There's lady mices, you know,
Yeah. I know
stuff
this.
like this, and the rate went down significantly. That's my life, right? My life, you know, I'm glad that I'm sober. It's one of my greatest accomplishments by far. When I look at the life that I've built, you know, I just don't think the distraction of alcohol and drugs was something that I needed to get to where I am. You know, the husband, father that I am, you know, I don't know what would have happened if I had started drinking, but I know I'm happy with the way that things are right now. And I think that what he says in the video at the end, that, the cure for addiction is not abstinence, it's connection. And I believe that in the deepest part of my soul, right? And I believe that for everything. And I think you probably see that, you know, in what we do with Eat to Perform related to fat loss too, right? I believe that, you know, people need a shared journey, you know, and to know that it's a, you know, I remember early on when I was more tempted to, you know, relapse or whatever, you know, that day-to-day thing meant so much to me, because I mean, I remember one night sitting in my car and I decided I'm going to call every single person in my list, you know, and then, you know, at the end of this list, I'm going to go drink, right? And I woke up the next morning, you know, with my cell phone in my hand. You know, I had one of the early cell phones, and the list of names, and I fell asleep in my car. And the next day, you know, ended up being just another day, you know. And you know, the AA, you know, NA community, that was big for me early on, but really it was the life that I built. And if there's any one thing that I would say to anyone newly sober, is don't just focus on the sobriety piece, focus on the building of the life piece.
I tell people all the time, Vaughn and Amanda both, I'm very fortunate to be in a position with two partners, one being a business partner and one being a life partner, that are intrigued by sobriety, intrigued by alcoholism and addiction, and also open to the isms that come with that. But I tell people all the time that recovery and 12-step meetings is an excellent supplement to life, but it's not a life in and of itself. Right. I mean, it's a great thing to have, and I wouldn't be here without it, I don't believe. But just exactly what you said, community, connection, fellowship, that's what I've found to be the world to be all about. And I need those, I need that, the 12-step fellowship, not only for me, but to pass on to other people. But the community outside of that community that's what keeps me sober and keeps me going.
Well, and I think, you know, a little bit of what you're saying, I believe that as well. But I believe that in a lot of ways, when people are newly sober, see, what you see is there's a lot of newly sober people. There's a few old timers. But I think a lot of the old timers, you know, which unfortunately, you know, I am at this point. It was really funny, like going to get one of my pens recently. I still get my pen every single year. I do it mostly because of my teenage daughters, because I want them to know that their dad, and they know everything. You know, I mean, I have no secrets about that type of stuff. But man, it's hard to pull one over on your dad when, you know, drug addiction was in his past. You know.
Oh yeah.
but a lot of what you're saying in terms of fellowship and stuff like that doesn't just apply to sobriety, right? It's really about life, you know, and you know, getting the word out there for virtually everything, and you can spread your message in other ways, and that's just as fulfilling. It, you don't have to just spread your message to another addict, right? There's a lot of people that can help, because I can tell you for myself, and I think for a lot of people, there was a large mental piece. I mean, when you talk about the psychotherapy that I went through and the things that I learned, I mean, I can literally pull my heart out of my chest and show it to you. You know what I mean? And I think that comes across at Eat to Perform. I think people like that kind of honesty, and the people that don't, I think, sometimes, they're still struggling that struggle, and they're just not ready for it at that point. But I always feel like, the more open you can be, people can say, yeah, I see a little bit of myself in that.
Well, that kind of gut level honesty is what I believe people are attracted to, that gut level honesty. And I believe that that's what helps somebody like you make the ballsy decisions that you've made. And there's an explanation towards why you have such a large and successful company, and why you've been courageous enough to do these large, courageous adventures. With your different businesses and everything. But there's also typically another side to that, whereas that's insecurity and fear. Do you wrestle with all that?
Oh my God. Yeah. Please. I mean, it's just funny, like even you talking about like the success and stuff like that, I mean, all I can think about every single day, I'd love to say it was customers first, but it's really not. I mean, it's really the 51 people that are on the payroll. That's my biggest thing. And I would say, you have a lot of insecurities that you got to keep growing the business. I feel a lot of responsibilities there. And certainly there's a lot of insecurities that, I mentioned Whole30, Whole30 7-8 years ago was everything, right? It was everywhere. Everyone was doing a Whole30 and then a Whole 9 reset and, all those other things. It's not as big a deal anymore. There's a lot of examples of that. I think paleo in general, people are starting to realize that, eating mostly whole foods, if you don't think that I think it's kind of funny, because I think that people think that I went from 250 to 162, eating like Rice Krispie treats and Pop-Tarts. I didn't, there was a lot of chicken and kale in there, and, but the fear is that you lose people's interest, right? I think the other thing too, since we started Trend Sheets, one of the things that if I'm being real honest with you, people sort of like the idea of information and support without the accountability, right? And our business has actually decreased based on that accountability piece. And that's okay, right? Because to me, the core of Eat to Perform always was accountability. We just, when people would say, do you have an app? We had no idea what that app would do, right? And so, in developing the Trends app, now we know what that app needs to do, and we look at that as a big communication piece. And, I think the other thing too that, as everyone kind of similar to us is fighting over a smaller piece of things, and you look at the bigger people like Weight Watchers and MyFitnessPal and these types of things, if you don't have a large mobile presence, you're out of business, right? And so that's we've known for a long time that was a direction that we needed to go. And I know a lot of people within Eat to Perform are really excited about it. I think, truthfully, it's going to be like any app. 6 months to a year from now, you're going to look at this app and go, wow, this thing is amazing. I think when it comes out, each performers are going to love it. But new people are going to be like, I don't totally get it, right? I mean, imagine if you were an intuitive eater, you tried to eat mostly good, things of this nature, and you weren't new to, you were kind of new to food logging. We get those people every single day, and they come in and they're like, I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed. It's kind of easy to be confused and overwhelmed, right? Like whenever you're learning a new way to do things, somebody walks into your gym, say, man, guys, I appreciate the help, but I'm confused and overwhelmed. I'm out of here. What are they really saying to you? Right?
I don't feel like screwing with this.
I just need a reason to leave.
This shit's hard. This shit is hard, right? And let's be real. Anything worthwhile is hard, and that's why I really applaud, the thousands of people that are doing it on a daily basis, because they're doing something really hard. I think to a certain extent, always trying to starve yourself to ideal body composition is a coward's way out, right? You never quite get there, right? Because you don't have enough work capacity to do what you want to do, but you're able to kind of keep, some measure of lean. If you're not phasing things in and out, you're just letting your fears rule you. And I don't think that that's a good way to be. And I'm speaking from personal experience, by the way. I failed doing that over and over again.
Well, you've got 51 people working for you. You have tens of thousands of people in your group. Do you consider yourself a success, or are you always more? Always have to have more?
I've always considered myself a success. I don't think anything that happens with Eat to Perform will determine whether or not I'm a success or not, because that's not how I define success. I look at my daughters and my wife and my family, and, like business is business. I mean, people say this, we were talking about this on one of our podcasts recently, and someone asked me if Eat to Perform is my dream job. It is a dream job from the standpoint of I get to help a lot of people on a daily basis and do some real cool stuff. But I could also think of some other things that are real cool stuff that, I'd like to see, like I'm very interested in young people, moving towards entrepreneurship, and I've thought about ways to kind of do that from a social media perspective. But in terms of success, I guess if you were to ask, is Eat to Perform a success? The answer, or do I think Eat to Perform is a success? I think that that's a tricky thing to talk about, right? Because the minute you think you're there, that's when, you get the whooping, right? Mm-hmm. That's when Joe Louis comes back from 7.
Yeah. You don't want to get comfortable.
Yeah. And so, and every time and I don't know if this is your guys' experience with your businesses as well, but you keep getting better, and the growth is only marginal. And part of the reason why is because everybody around you is also getting better, right? And, in the fitness industry, and I don't think this happens as much with CrossFit gyms, but, it does happen a little bit. You see some people and they'll join this one gym and they'll do the treadmill, and then 2 months later they're joining Orange Theory, and then Orange Theory, they leave them at 3 to 4 months, and they're just program hopping, right? And that happens in the nutrition world. I mean, somebody comes to me eating 1,300 calories, and I say to them, look, we got to get your calories normal. I think normal, to begin with, probably looks at 1,800. If that scares the shit out of them, guess what they're going to do? They're going to cancel and move on to someone that'll tell them what they want to hear. Doesn't mean that that's going to be the truth. Doesn't mean that that's going to be a thing that actually, works for them. But, people let their fears dictate, their journey too often. And ultimately, I don't think it allows for them not to only reach body composition goals, but mental clarity, right? I mean, if there's any one thing, and I don't know if Amanda could speak to this, but, mental clarity is so huge, in our community. I think, you see that in your Facebook group and stuff like this, where people are starting off and then they start to realize, man, if I just don't focus on trying to lose 50 pounds in 50 days, what does it do for me mentally? What does it allow, if you can stretch it out a little bit longer, be a little forgiving of yourself, be a little bit of patient, what does that do? And it literally is the answer. It's the key to everything.
I think Eat to Perform has a lot of reality examples where you can't lose 50 pounds in 50 days, but you see the people like you who have goals, and as they struggle, you're struggling along with them, and you get to see that. And I think it's just a great group to go to have that support and to realize that you're not the only one dealing with this and trying to figure all this shit out and trying to get your nutrition straight. And you have other people to lean on and ask questions with and to have discussions with and forums to try to better yourself. And at the same time, they're bettering themselves as well.
Yeah, don't you guys feel like, I feel like when I first started CrossFitting, the natural assumption was everybody was overeating, right? If you were, joining a gym, everyone assumed that you were under eating. And that is not the assumption anymore, right? We did that, right? We did that by ourselves. No one else is carrying that torch the way we've carried it. Now, some people are overeating, right? And some people are, I might have got that mixed up, but some people, you can't just naturally assume someone's, overeating all the time and that, eating less is going to be the answer. And so getting a little bit more specific, makes a big difference. And we've carried that torch and we'll continue to carry that torch because it's the truth.
You employ one of my favorite people in the world who I've just recently come to know, which is Lizabeth Darsh. We had her on our podcast, and she is just an absolutely incredible ball of energy and source of inspiration. Yeah,
Elizabeth's great. As many people know, that she ran the affiliate program for CrossFit for a while. She was, person on the social media. What I love about Lizabeth is that, she's just going to plow through the rocks, head first. And her attitude is infectious. I think anything that we put out that she writes gets to be, distributed, and people are affected greatly by it. And so, we've been lucky to have her, for the last couple years, and I think people really enjoy her content, and they should, because she's a real gem.
Yeah, she's a remarkable lady. I want to ask you, I told you we wouldn't keep you too long, and I lied to you already. But I want to ask you, you have 2 lovely daughters and a beautiful wife. Can you tell us a little bit about them, what they have going on?
Yeah, so my wife, needed a fixer-upper, and I had I don't know what to say about my wife. I'm still head over heels for my wife, and that takes work every single day, but when you've been in the foxhole with someone, being an entrepreneur, I've had a lot of those moments where you're in the closet, turning the lights on and off, wondering whether or not, things are going to get better. And my wife's been this whole time, I've always said that, like, the best gift that you can give your children is to not just love their mother, but to physically love their mother, right? And my kids see me kissing my wife. They see us flirting in the kitchen. Of course they go, oh, it's so gross, but they love it. They love it because it provides them some security. And to a certain extent, my dad's been divorced, 6 times. And, I tried to learn from his lessons, and my dad and I have a great relationship. It was kind of funny, though. My dad actually had the gall to say to me that he knows a little bit more about marriage than I do. And I say, well, if you add up all your marriages, it doesn't equal my one. So yeah, I mean, I tried to marry my wife within a year of knowing her. She said no to me. I still think we would have made it. She eventually proposed to me. So I think it was like 5-6 years later, something like that. Just because I said, look, I'm not going to be dealing with that kind of. I mean, I went all out, right? I asked her parents for her hand in marriage and all that stuff, and I'm still that much from the South, and it was just embarrassing. But I still, she still thinks she made the right decision, and I disagree because I was head over heels for her then. I'm head over heels for her now. Now, from her perspective, I think I still have a little bit of proving to do. From my perspective, I wanted to lock that down real quick. My other daughters, they could not be more different. One of the things that's interesting right now, my oldest daughter, she has a makeup business. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Sneaker Don. In terms of time, by the way, I'm good on time.
Okay, good.
I have a podcast in 45 minutes, but other than that, I should be fine. I shouldn't be that long-winded. But there's this guy, the Sneaker Don, and it's actually this young kid. He's like 15, 16 years old. And every hip-hop artist in the world has this kid's phone number because he sells really rare collectible sneakers, right? So my oldest daughter does that for makeup. And, last year she had identified, hey, I think that this is going to be really, popular. And so, we loaned her $200. She bought 6 of them. And right now, I think her inventory, last night we ended up sending out 28 packages. She sells at least $1,000 a day right now.
Wow.
Her inventory is probably close to $15,000. But it's not the money, because truthfully, she's reinvested every single nickel. She's not taking one, it's not about the money. It's just, she's so passionate about it. And, previous to this, we'd really struggled with her, from the standpoint of schools and things like that. She actually goes to a one-on-one school. And I can't speak more highly about that. I think, she's got a little bit of her dad in her. She's got kind of the ADHD thing going on. And not that you guys can tell from the conversation that we've had so far. Right?
Hey, you're one speaking to another. I can identify.
Yeah, but she started going to this new school, and you just wonder, she went from really struggling in school, but always testing great, right? She was, top 1% of 1% of the district, but in terms of there was so much social going on. She had to be to school at 7:00 in the morning. She goes to school at 10:00 every single day. She only goes to school for about 4 to 5 hours a day. And she only goes to school 4 days a week. And, she's real close to graduating, and she would have been in her junior year. Now, my youngest daughter is the exact opposite. She could not be thriving more in high school. I do think that she's a little funny. I didn't really, I wouldn't say that I was a jock, but I was definitely like a wannabe jock, right? I was on the baseball team. And I always tried to be, physical, even though I was a really small kid. Even in high school, I was like 135 pounds. There's a picture of me with my wife when I was 19 years old. I was 137 pounds in that picture. So genetically, I was not, meant to be, Mr. Athlete or anything like that. And I do kind of wonder, because of my daughter's experiences with theater and the creative side of stuff, if I was exposed to more of that kind of thing, what that would have been like. And my youngest daughter is a spark the opposite way. She's phenomenal in high school. She's quirky as can be. Minnesota is just so interesting. And my daughters take great pride in the fact that they're just normal, quirky Minnesotans. Now, all of us, except for my wife, are dying to get the hell out of here as quick as we can, because it's just cold all the time. But that's a bit of a meme, right? It's a bit of a joke. We do love being from here. I am more from here than I am from New Orleans, except for sports-wise. I'm not going to be rooting for the Minnesota Gophers anytime soon. But yeah, so I just, when I look back at my family, I'm just really proud, and that's the success piece that I look at. And I can't forget my dog, right? We, for the longest time, thought we weren't a dog family. And, I just, we've all fallen in love with her, and she's been a great addition to our, we used to say core 4, now we're core 5, so that's been interesting.
What kind of dog do you have?
She is a Shih Tzu Bichon mix, and we adopted her when she was 9 from the people across the street. We were, looking at maybe getting a dog because my oldest, we were sort of being told by some people that, she might respond to an animal. This was when she was struggling with school and stuff like this. So we had already started the thought process of, okay, maybe we'll be open to a dog. And just so happened on Facebook, my neighbor said, I'm leaving for college. Is anybody interested in Kira? And we were like, yeah, we are. We had known this dog since it was a puppy. And she's not a nice dog at all. Like she's an angry little angsty dog. She's not mean she's mean to the other dogs in the neighborhood, but we love the hell out of her, so yeah.
Well, that's great, Paul. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. I appreciate you being a part of the Lift Heavy Run Long community. I think it's a great thing that you're doing at Eat to Perform. You have a absolutely fantastic reputation. I would imagine that you know that already, but if you don't, you need to know. And I just think you're doing great things, man. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Well, I appreciate it. I think, it's interesting. There's a couple things, like I had said when I joined your group, it had been suggested to me for a long time, and I had many friends that were a member of your group, and I didn't know what it was about. I hadn't heard about the podcast until Dan's podcast, which was phenomenal. To get to know Dan was amazing. But when you look at what you guys do, there's actually a piece of what you guys are doing that we're going to try and start doing, where we're going to start highlighting members in our podcast, where we, I think people are going to really dig that because, it'll allow them to get to know people a little bit better. But also, I want to explore the mental stuff. I want to explore where people came from and how they, what was their experience, and I think that, I picked that up a little bit from your podcast. I think highlighting members in that way, I mean, do we really need yet another interview from Jennifer Lawrence? Do we really, you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many regular people that are super interesting. And I would argue that YouTube has proven that. I would argue that Facebook has proven that. I'd much rather read about one of our members and something that they're doing with their kids than watch, something on television, right? Even, not that I don't watch television, but I do like television. But, when you look at how much time we all spend on YouTube videos or looking at pictures of family and stuff like that, to end things, what you guys are doing is how we envision ourselves, right? And I think any real good, bigger business does it that way, where you don't really focus on being kind of this mediocre big business. You really focus being on the best small business that you can be, and then you try and maintain that integrity as much as you can. I don't know if you guys listen to podcasts. I would assume you do since you have one. But the I Built This podcast for entrepreneurs from NPR, oh man, that is so good. And it really talks about that. And when you listen to one common theme that they're talking about over and over and over again, it's that don't let big become the goal, right? I think for a long time, our growth, we did get, a little distracted by that. And, getting back to trend sheets was almost a little disappointing because, when we realized that accountability piece, not everybody was up for that, right? Like we have, triple the people in our social group than we do in our accountability group, right? But, everybody has a different time for when they're ready to do whatever it is they're willing to do, so I appreciate, having me on, but you know what? You learn things from every side of things, and I think, the small bit of exposure I've had with you guys has already made an impression on me, and it's something that I definitely want to express more to our members.
Well, I appreciate the respect. That means a hell of a lot, especially coming from a person like you. I think that we're all fascinating creatures. We all have a story to tell. The only difference between an interesting person and someone who doesn't believe themselves to be interesting is that they haven't been told that they're interesting or have not been told that enough. So, anytime I can get with another person and talk to them and learn a little bit about them, I feel like I'm better because of it. And this has been no exception. So I think you're an interesting guy, and I appreciate you very, very much.
So one last thing, though. I do sort of wonder about what you just said, right? I wonder, because I have stories. I could go on all day long telling stories. I think we all have them. I just think that some of us are better than others in kind of getting them out, and I just enjoy the spirit of people, and I enjoy the fact that I can pull that out of people a little bit, and I think that the closer people come to people like you guys and people like myself, the more that they can be infected by what we're able to provide for them. And then, it opens up a whole new area. So I think that's a cool thing. So I just wanted to get that out there. I think my stories or your stories, we can communicate them well, but I think everybody's got these stories. I think everybody's got, special things that, that they think are important, or that they might not think is important, but a lot of other people will go, man, that's amazing,
Hey, and another thing is you have an open invitation to come sit on this couch whenever you're around this area. If we can get you here, and we'll even rope in Dan Koloski, take him hostage, and cause all kinds of problems.
I will never struggle to find an excuse to get to Memphis, right? And we never got to those stories, but boy, that would be kind of an interesting one another day. So that'll be my incentive to make it down to Memphis. All right.
Thanks a lot, Paul. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. Have a great day, man.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to Ted Horrell for providing the music that you hear at the beginning and the end of each episode. Be sure to head over to iTunes and search for Ted Horrell and the Monday Night Card for this music and more like it.
She's just bad for you. My advice for you is that you should go. She's got you hanging round like some locket she found. You've got to put her down. She's got 10